The star of the evening. This is about you tonight, so I'm going to talk less. But I wanted to frame this evening. You know, I've seen a lot of interviews with you, and it's always about your dad. You know, and of course, your dad is probably one of the most famous Chinese people in the world, most famous action star in the world, biggest action star in the world, and of course, a lot of people want to know about that. But I want to know about you. You know, we know where you started. You're the son of, you're the daughter of Bruce. Sorry, daughter of Bruce and Linda. And we know where you are now with the foundation, with Warrior and all that. But I want to know more about like how you got to where you are from where you started, right? So let's start in the beginning. Where you were born in California, right?
Santa Monica.
Santa Monica, West
Yep.
Side, right?
Yep.
And did you grow up in Santa Monica?
Well, we were living in Bel Air at the time,
Mhm.
but I was born in Santa Monica Hospital. And then when I was 2, we moved to Hong Kong
Yes.
because my dad made the
Yep.
films there. And then after he passed, we came back to Southern California by way of Seattle.
Okay. So you
Yeah.
spent time in Seattle then?
I went to 1 year of preschool in Seattle.
Oh, that early. Okay.
Yeah.
And then back down to
It's a
LA.
little tiny thing. Yeah. And I grew up actually in the South Bay in the Palos Verdes area.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
And then is that where you spent the rest of your
All the way through
upbringing?
high school. And then I went off to college at Tulane
in New Orleans?
in New Orleans. And I lived there for a couple years after I
What
graduated.
did you study?
Vocal performance.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I'm an operatically trained singer.
Which is actually, I wanted to get into that. We might as well hit it now since, because I was going to say, I vaguely remember you being in a band, but then also seeing you in the band in Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, right?
Dragon, yeah.
So tell me about that musical side of you, because I don't think a lot of people know about that.
Yeah, while we're on the Wayback Train, I might as well just say I used to love to sing around the house all the time. And my mom would say, "You have such a lovely voice. You should audition for something or at school." And I was so painfully shy that I was just like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And so finally, I think it was in the 7th grade. There was a musical, and I told my mom that they were going to be having auditions. She said, "You should audition." And so the day came, we were in music class, and the teacher said, "Does whoever wants to audition, raise your hand." And I was so shy, I did not raise my hand. And then, they auditioned all these people in front of everybody, which was like terrifying for me. And then after class, I went to the teacher and I said, "My mom really wants me to audition." And she said, "Okay, great. Well, sing something for me." And I sang something, and I actually got like a 2-line solo in the musical.
Awesome.
And from there, it was just like enough confidence to then audition for the musical next year, and
just build on.
And then I got the lead in the 8th grade play.
What was it? What was the play?
It was a Snoopy. I played Snoopy.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then, I was super into sports too.
Mhm.
So in high school, I went more the sports route. Played a ton of different sports. And then,
Oh, surprised that you're very physically good at
Yeah.
or something. Wonder where that came from.
yeah, I wonder.
But what sports did you play?
I played volleyball, I played soccer, I played softball.
Okay.
And for a little while when I was younger, I swam and I did diving.
Wow.
So I did a lot.
Very
of
athletic.
sports. Yeah. And but then I gave up softball to be able to do the spring musical.
Mm.
And so again, I auditioned as a junior, got a little tiny part, and then as a senior, I got the lead in The Music Man. I was Marion the librarian.
So you basically worked your way out of shyness to be able to perform, and then kind of get into the family business in some ways, right? Because your brother eventually ended up being an actor, right?
Yeah.
Was that a path at that time that you were thinking about? Like, I can become a singer, or I can become an actor, or I can become something in this business?
That sort of shyness or fear, maybe is a better way to put it, was more pervasive for me. Like my brother wanted to be an actor from the time he could talk. His whole life wanted to be an actor. He knew that from the time he was very small, and he dropped out of college, Emerson College, by the way.
Oh, really? He went here. He went here. Oh, wow. That's crazy.
In order to pursue his acting career full time. And for me, I was a little more trepidatious, a little more hesitant about whether or not I could really do it. And so I guess that sort of has informed my path all along. It's like,
Sure.
should I try it? Should I try it? And then I, at some point, just decide, and as you get older and you gain a little bit more confidence and maturity as a human being, then you get to a place where you're like, okay, I'm just going to give it a shot.
Right. How much of that fear was because of the family you were coming from? Like, was it because, did you think like, oh, people are going to be looking at me as the daughter of Bruce Lee or anything like that? Much more judgmental than, a nobody or a new person, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, I would say that over my lifetime, feeling like I had big shoes to fill has been a theme. And yeah, as Bruce Lee's daughter, what everybody wants you to do is martial arts.
Of course.
And so even though I when I was growing up and my dad was still alive, it was martial arts all day, all the time at our house. Like if you had 2 arms and legs, you were, and maybe even if you didn't, you were still doing martial arts.
Right.
So, but then when he died, both my brother and I really shied away from doing martial arts. It just felt too painful. But then once I was an adult, I really wanted to know him. And I mean, he created his own martial art.
Yeah.
So it was like, I need to know what this is. I need to study this. And so I hadn't been studying it for very long. And, the only thing being offered to me as an actor was action films. And so.
And that, do you think that's because of the name?
Yeah,
for sure, right?
For sure, 100%. And so I kind of had, if I wanted to break in, I guess I didn't have to, but it was a choice. And I made the choice to go ahead and try. I mean, as I said, I was athletic, so, and I had been training a bit. But, there were some very crushing blows to me in the industry. First of all, when I started acting, it was right after my brother had died. And I had talked to him about coming and trying to be an actor in LA. And he said, if there's anything else that you would rather do, you should do that instead.
What was his reasoning for that?
He said it's a very tough business. It's a lot of rejection. It's particularly hard for women. You're very objectified, and you got to have a thick skin. But he also said, if this is what you want to do, then of course you should do it. And I would try to help you. And wouldn't this be fun? We'll both be in LA and all that kind of thing. And because at the time I was living in New Orleans, and so I made this whole plan to move back to LA to act, and then he was killed. Yeah. So it was very hard to be present for my acting career at the time.
Did you do formal training, or did you like?
Yeah, I enrolled in an acting school. I did 2 years of training at an acting school in Santa Monica, and I was great in acting class. And then I would get a job, and I'd get on set, and I'd be like, "Oh my god."
It's okay. I still hate auditioning. I'm terrible at auditions.
Oh, auditioning. Oh, yeah. And so, but there were a few crushing blows. I can't remember what I did. Some group took out a full-page ad in the Variety against me.
What? When was this? And what was it about?
They said that I was a fraud and that I shouldn't pursue acting or do martial arts.
Oh, this is like Nepo Baby stuff before Nepo Babies were the thing. Wow,
Yeah.
that is crazy that somebody did that. That's
Yeah.
takes a lot of effort and money to do something like that.
I know. I know. You know, and it's very hurtful at a time when I'm already in
Yes, yeah,
in a
you're
hurt
trying to form
place.
yourself, and
Yeah.
you haven't found yourself yet, and then
Yeah.
people are saying these kind of things. That's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Let's reverse back a little bit. What?
Okay.
Because I'll get back to that. But
Okay.
so, what was your upbringing like in basically West Side California, Southern California?
Yeah.
Did you let's talk about identity. Did you identify as being Chinese, or I know because we grew up in the 80s and 90s. There was not a lot of representation on screen. Your dad was the only thing that I saw growing up, right?
Yeah.
And so, being of mixed race, you can code switch. You can go back and forth between the two, and you can choose sides, right? My daughter is mixed race too. She can do that as well.
Mhm.
What was that like growing up in Southern California at that time for you?
I think because my father was even though he wasn't there, he was such a strong presence in my life, and he was such a strong energy, and I just always could feel his love surrounding me, and because of that, I felt very loved and seen in a way. And in a way that made me feel safe within my own body. And so because of that, I loved my Chinese heritage. I felt very close to it. My mom, even though, she's blonde hair and blue eyes, very Caucasian looking woman, she could speak Cantonese, and she would cook Chinese food, and
Oh, wow.
we would celebrate Chinese New Year, and we would do all of these things. So
she made a big effort to try and keep the Chinese heritage.
Yeah, and my father's students, many of which were Chinese, would come and hang out and be around the house a lot and things like that. For me, I mean, I got called all sorts of different things growing up, like most people would think when my brother and I were with my mom that she was not our mother. And if I had a friend that was, Caucasian or blonde, they would assume that she was the daughter. And but I guess I felt very secure in my parents' love. It didn't make me feel like, well, why would they do that? I mean, I could see why they would think that, but it didn't make me feel smaller, really. And I really think that I have the love of my parents and also the bigness of my father's sort of imprint as shelter in a way for me growing up. But I was often mistaken for Hispanic, or all sorts of or different things where people would say, "Well, what are you? What is your background?" And those types of things. But as you say, I could kind of blend in a little bit wherever I would go.
Right.
Not really Asian enough,
Right.
not really Caucasian enough. And so I think sometimes when you're mixed race like that, you have to go within a bit.
Yeah.
To be like, well, I'm me. That's who I am. Yeah.
I agree. It's interesting because, and I want to ask you about like when you went back to Hong Kong as you're an adult. When I went back to Hong Kong in '97, it was funny because I grew up here thinking I was very Asian, and then when I got over there, my nickname was Guai Zai, which is white boy, right? And like I remember eating dinner on set with chopsticks, and this crew member was like, "How come you know how to use chopsticks?" Like they were surprised that an American person. He's like, "Don't you eat hamburgers every day?" And I was like very shocked to think that I looked the same as the guy, but because I'm from America, he looked at me as totally different. Did you come across that like cultural shock when you went back to Hong Kong, like as an adult?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, because I have this weird thing, right? Like if I'm in a setting where people know that I'm Bruce Lee's daughter, then oh, you're Chinese, you're, all of that. But if I'm out in my normal life, out in Hong Kong, then I'm treated like a foreigner completely, My Cantonese is not so great. So
Right.
there's that also.
Right.
But yeah, I'm pretty much treated like a foreigner unless they happen to know that I'm Bruce Lee's daughter, and then I'm not.
Right. Right. You have the golden ticket. Like I said, you're the daughter of probably the most famous Chinese person in the world. Okay, who were people that were influential to you growing up, that kind of formed the way you are? Obviously, your dad is one influence, but
Yeah.
who were mentors, heroes that were around you growing up, or even people that weren't around you, people that you looked up to, other outside, other actors, other musicians, or whatever, that influenced you and made you want to be like that, or guided you in your growing up?
Yeah, it's so interesting to me. I do have to say, I know, yes, my father is a huge influence for me, a huge mentor for me, a huge guide for me, was and always will be, for obvious reasons. I would say, interestingly, my brother
Mm-hmm.
was also a really big influence to me. He was a typical older brother. He would torture me. He would, do all of those things.
Practice something on some move on you.
Oh yeah, he would walk on me. He would lock me in a room with and all those different things that older brothers do.
Right.
But he also would sit me down and talk to me. And I think he sort of felt a certain responsibility, because our dad wasn't there. Like I remember when I was trying to decide what to study in college, he was the one who said to me, well, you should just follow your heart, take classes in things that you seem interested in,
Mm-hmm.
and then just find your way by following your heart, which is amazing advice. And he also talked to me when I was going into high school about, the horrors of high school and all the things I would encounter there. His advice, however, was probably not something that my mother would have appreciated, which was try it all.
Sure. Sure. Well, was your mother more conservative in terms of like what you should do? Did she want you to be, like in my family, it was like you be a doctor or a lawyer or something like that,
She definitely wanted me to be a lawyer. She had a Christmas ornament of a lawyer. I can't remember. I was like holding a law book or something, and she was like, "I got this for you." It's like, okay.
She's very Chinese.
Yeah.
Very passive aggressive there.
Exactly. But she, she was very supportive of whatever I wanted to do. My brother was like the wild child, like constantly expressing himself, getting into trouble. He was kicked out of high school. Also never graduated from high school. And he was just doing wild stuff all the time. And so I think she knew he wanted to be an actor. When he was in high school, I knew he wanted to be an actor. Right. And so I think she was hoping that I would take a different route, maybe. But she also didn't push. She didn't, say forcibly, this is what I want you to do, or anything like that. Just subtle, passive-aggressive hints here and there. But as you know, she encouraged me to sing. Right. So I think she just wanted me to be happy, and still does. Yeah.
Did you have any other influences? Like, what was your favorite band growing up? Who was your favorite?
Oh my God. When I was in high school, I loved Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. It was like my favorite album. Nice. I loved David Bowie, Ziggy Stardust, and Spiders from Mars. I just, I loved those albums. I would write the lyrics all over my Peachy going way back.
Peachy folders. Remember those?
Yeah, I loved those bands. I really loved classical music, actually. I played the piano for 12 years or something.
Good
like
Asian.
that.
Good Asian.
Yes, good Asian.
Yes.
So I loved classical music too. And my mom used to take us to go see musical theater all the time. So, there was a strong influence there.
Is that what kind of pushed you in that direction to study that in college, or?
I just loved to sing.
Mm.
And so when I got into college, I auditioned for the choir, and I got in and sang in the choir, and then I took some music classes and music lessons to singing lessons. And then I just decided it was for me. I could already read music and play and all of that. So, yeah.
Do you do much of that today? These days?
Well,
Playing music?
it's so interesting. So I have sung the national anthem for the San Francisco Giants, for the Seattle Sounders, for things like that. There's a very famous Hong Kong singer, Sam Hui,
Oh yeah.
who's a good personal friend, and I've sung on stage with him in the Hong Kong Coliseum,
Awesome.
in Vegas, in Reno, in China, in Shanghai, and Guangzhou, and all these places. So I get on stage with him occasionally.
Did you have a band? Were you in a band?
I didn't have like my own band,
Right.
but I released an album with a band called Medicine.
Yeah, I recall that. Okay.
Yeah, called The Mechanical Forces of Love. It's kind of a trippy little album. It's like an amalgamation of rock and electronic music. My friend Brad is the main person behind it. So that was really fun. I like to, every opportunity I get to sing and to be creative. I think what you're getting at, for me is the thing I've discovered about myself by trying all these different things is that I love to be creative. And that my approach to everything is through creativity. It's the approach to living life. It's the approach to running a business. It's the approach to also the creative projects that I do.
And do you think that's something that was innately in you that you discovered over time? I mean, because that happens to fall in line with your dad's major philosophy, which is like, be your own creative self, right?
Yeah.
When did that stuff merge together? You as a person, and then you discovering your dad's philosophies and thinkings and writings and all that stuff, and coming together and go, whoa, I see now. This all makes sense. Like, what point in your life did that start to happen?
I think it all started to make sense about 5 years ago.
Oh, only 5 years ago. Okay.
I mean, I tried a lot of things, but it didn't really become like, oh, light bulb moment, this is me. Maybe it was sooner than, further back than 5 years, but I didn't realize that it was the creativity. It was, I love to write. And I tried writing, and it was one of those things where I was one of the victims of a terrible teacher, where I had a professor, a creative writing professor. It was one of the things I signed up for in college on my brother's advice. Oh, creative writing, I like that. I'm going to try that. And the teacher was just awful, and I was like, oh, clearly I'm not good at this. And then I didn't write anything for decades.
That's so crazy because we were just talking about backstage if I write, and the reason why I don't write is because I had the same experience in high school.
Yeah.
That we had a Yale English professor who I never got higher than a C+
Yeah.
in any of his writing things. So I was like, okay, I'm a shitty writer, right?
Yeah.
But I just labeled myself as that the whole time.
I'm here to tell you it's not true.
Nice, right? Thank you. This is therapy for me too. Okay, I'm gonna write.
Don't believe it. Don't believe it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy how those kinds of things can really, really influence you for the rest of your life. Okay.
Yeah.
So you realize you're a creative being, much like your father, right? This is only 5 years ago?
I mean, I realized as a creative, I don't know, maybe like a dozen years ago, I realized, oh, creativity, that's my thing. Having known that I tried all these creative things, I tried writing, I tried singing, I tried acting, and then I decided to try stewarding my father's legacy. And really, it's a strange thing where all of the big aha moments in my life have come through my father in a weird way. When I was really suffering and in a lot of grief after my brother's death, it was my father's writings that helped me to start to sort of take my life back and learn how to heal from that. And it was through stewarding his legacy that I started to understand, again, just like having that touch point to his words and his energy and his being all the time, that I started to go like, oh, yeah, I do all these things because I love to create, and I've just been able to give myself permission more and more as time goes on to just go ahead and be as creative as I frickin' want to.
Mm.
You know, like I'm one of those people who has like an entire cabinet full of craft supplies, you
Right.
know, and I kind of like, I'm like, well, you're not really a painter and you're not like, why do you have all these crafts? It doesn't matter. It's because I love to be creative. And there's a meditation in it
Yes, yes.
as well.
Mm.
And so as I get older, and it's great because once you get in your 50s, you're just like, I don't fucking care.
Right.
You know,
right.
like, whatever.
right.
Yes, I like to craft.
Right.
Yay me, you know.
Own it. You got to own it. Yeah.
But yeah, it's like I've just been able to give myself permission more and more and get out from under the mantle of Bruce Lee,
Right.
this like thing that I, you know, have been like afraid of in a way my whole life.
I mean, I'm sure that has been a flip flop your whole life, right?
Yes.
You're embracing it. You want to get away from it. You want to embrace it. Like, was there a point where you're like, I don't want any to do with any of this stuff. I want to be my own thing. Or was this a slow, gradual evolution? Like,
it's been a slow, gradual evolution. I don't think at any point ever did I say I don't want to be associated with this,
Right.
because I'm very proud to be associated with it. And my father's love is so nurturing and strong that I'm like can't separate myself.
was there ever a point where you wanted people to look at you as opposed to Bruce Lee's daughter, right? Like, would there be, angry or whatever at moments like that?
Yeah, I mean, another traumatizing moment was when I was acting. I was doing a film in Hong Kong, and and we were doing this scene and doing a few takes, and the director came up to me and said, "Just do it like your dad would do it."
Oh my God.
Yeah, and
Oh
I
my
was
God.
like,
And I think I know who that is.
"Okay."
I remember when I met you. Actually met you in Hong Kong when
Yeah.
I think you were working on that movie.
Yeah.
And we were at a kickboxing match, and I saw you. You were right next to us. With Bay Logan was there, a bunch of people.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
oh God, that's a terrible thing to say
It's
to
a
someone.
terrible thing to say. Yeah,
Like,
and I
that's
was
worse than
like,
saying, "Here's a line reading for you." It's
Yeah.
like, no, act like your dad would.
yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah.
Okay.
And so, you know, you stiff upper lip, you're like, okay. And you like do your best. And then you go in your trailer and you cry for an hour.
Right. Right. And so those moments make you want to. What do you do in that moment? Like, how do you find your peace?
You know, I think that's why it's been such a look at this, like just rookie move, having my ringer on. Okay.
I didn't hear it. No one heard it.
I think that's why it's been a gradual thing for me.
Mm.
You know, I think the thing that I've been in most relationship with directly is whether or not to tell people that my father is Bruce Lee or
Mm.
not.
Mm.
When I was a kid, my mom told us, don't go tell people that, don't let that be the first thing that comes out of your mouth, you know, like don't lead with that. Let people get to know you, like you for you and all that. Now, which was great advice.
Mm.
Fast forward to what I do for a living is steward my father's legacy. So, you know, it's one of the first questions anybody asks you when they first, so what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I have a licensing business.
Yeah.
You know, oh, what do you license?
T-shirts.
T-shirt, yeah, celebrity likeness for oh, what celebrity? But
I feel you.
But you know, at the time, but the thing is that at some point, like in my 20s, I started to feel like I was keeping a secret. I wasn't being honest. And here is my father's, right, like philosophy, self-actualization, you know, like be fully yourself.
Mm.
And so then I would experiment a little with like just immediately saying like, oh yeah, I licensed Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee's my dad. That doesn't work out so well either a lot of the time, you know, because for some people that's a very explosive phenomenon. And then you're not treated as yourself. You're treated as,
Yes.
something other than yourself. And so so that is something that's always been really hard, and I would say that yes, there's always been a deep longing in me to just be me. But I don't think that's any different for anyone. And yes, my circumstances are a little different. There's a little more maybe public challenge in that way. But it also has forced me to really look at it and to really try to be me and to figure out what that is, which is a lifelong quest for anyone.
Yeah, and it seems like yes. It seems like you've put in a lot of hours meditating on that, what that is, right?
Yeah.
And actually using your dad's philosophies, because his philosophies were about that, about you being yourself, your best self, your
Yeah.
truest self, right?
Yeah.
And it must have been really difficult to go, okay, I want to be my truest self, but then this is who my dad is and how that goes, right?
Right.
Well,
Well,
it's a
because
struggle, right?
I can't separate myself from
No.
that. I can't say, well, I'm not that. I am,
Mhm.
you know? But that's not the only thing that I am. It's just one aspect of me.
So was there an aha moment, or was there a moment where you just went, okay, I'm gonna embrace all this now, and this is who I am? Was there a time that happened?
Yeah, I think that was probably at some point over the last 10 years. Yeah, it's been recent. But, I mean, I think everybody, especially as you're on the trajectory of your life, there are younger people here, there are older people here. With every decade that passes, you're like, oh, I'm more myself now. Wow, look at what I figured out at this point. And now I'm in my 50s and
Don't give a fuck.
yeah, I don't give a fuck. I give zero fucks. So, but I think the thing that I'm coming into now, which is also part of my father's philosophy, but he didn't say it exactly this way, is, he always talked about, self-actualizing and fulfilling your potential and all this kind of stuff. But it's more like not being afraid to fully live. Like we're so afraid to fully live. Well, what will that mean? What would it say? I'm like, look, I've already had someone take out an ad against me in a major publication.
Right,
So, like, fully, what does that mean to fully live?
It's especially poignant in this day and age now with like social media, so much pressure for kids to conform to a certain way or a certain standard and a certain image. It's really important to get that idea out there.
Yeah.
We need to be ourselves.
And why are we so afraid of that? I know I mean, I am. I'm just being honest, Like, it's scary to think, well, if I just lived fully, I just embraced life fully. I just went out there and saw, well, what could I do? I mean, that is what my father did, and look how that turned out. We're still talking about him 50 years later.
Yeah, and nothing held him back, really. I mean, whenever he came across some kind of adversity, he found some way to get around it. He flowed like water, right?
Yeah.
Around it all. And, wasn't working out here, went back to Hong Kong, and then that blew him up and then brought him back over. And so, yeah, he's the best example of how you face that stuff.
Yeah.
I remember reading a letter that he wrote to himself about where he wanted to see himself. He wanted to be the first Chinese American or Chinese star to make $10 million a movie or something like that. I remember the letter was very strong because I can't even think that way now, right? Like, but I would like to try to get to that point where I'm like, okay, this is gonna happen, right? And that self-actualization philosophy is so powerful and so strong, but so hard to do nowadays, right?
It is. It's hard to do.
Give yourself permission to think that way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But really, I mean, what is life for? It's in one of his quotes is the meaning of life is that it is to be lived. Lived.
To its fullest potential also, yeah, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we talked about kind of coming back to the family. Now let's talk about get into the foundation and the Bruce Lee LLC. I want to ask about that because it's interesting. You came back into I want to say 2011. Is it?
Well,
2011.
2000 is when I started looking after my father's legacy, but it took me till 2011 to clean up a whole lot of things.
Yeah, because I mean, as a huge Bruce Lee fan myself growing up, there was all kinds of merchandise that I collected, whatever, and I suddenly realized like that was all non-approved IP, right? None of it was. So for 20, 30 years, all this stuff was being made in your dad's image that you guys never got credit for, never got licensing for, none of it, right?
I mean, there was some licensing. I think the biggest thing was that when I came in, the commercial rights to my father's name and likeness were controlled by one of the studios.
Wow. Everything, name and likeness.
In perpetuity.
Wow. How did that happen?
Bad legal counsel.
Okay. And was that because of Enter the Dragon or
No.
before that?
No, not before that. From Dragon, the Bruce Lee story.
Oh, interesting. Okay, okay.
And so, I came in and, we had a deal with with this studio who were representing him, and they had to make a very low 5-figure annual payment in order to keep the rights in perpetuity.
Mm-hmm. While they're making millions on top of that. That's crazy.
Yeah. And so I was like, how am I going to get out of this? And so it just kept plugging away. We didn't even have approval rights over the merchandise at the time.
Wow.
So when I stepped in, they had done enough egregious things that I was able to renegotiate and get some approval rights back. And then once I had approval rights, I was like, no.
Right.
No, you're not doing
Sure.
it. And, time shifted and industries shifted, and they wanted certain things and didn't want certain things. And so I just kept negotiating and negotiating. And I mean, I looked into like, what would it be to sue and, all these different things. But I mean, I don't have the resources to take on a major studio.
Sure.
And
so they basically bullied you, right?
Yeah.
And how long did it take to finally get the control back?
11 years.
Wow.
But I got it back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It must be so emotional roller coaster to deal with that, because it's literally people making money off your father's name and cutting you out of it completely, right? Cutting the whole family out of it. And it's just infuriating, right?
I mean, it's sort of my life story. I mean, when I first started producing and wanting to produce, I had many people come to me all the time. They want to do Bruce Lee projects. And the first thing they say is, we want your blessing to do this Bruce Lee project. We want this TV show and this movie, but we don't want you to be involved in it. We just want the rights.
Right.
And I'm like, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Anymore,
Right. Right.
So, which is why it's taken me a really long time to get things made, because I had to find people who were willing to work with me on it. And so I'm so grateful for someone like Justin Lin, who was like, yes. And not just yes, because, I mean, you guys, a lot of you know, like, everybody says the right thing in the room, right? Of course we want you to be involved, of course. And then you get the contract and it's like, but not officially.
Yes, right.
Right. And I'm like, no, it has to be official. That's how it works. And so Justin, when we were going to make Warrior, yes. He said, yes, of course, I want you to be my partner. And I was like, okay, we'll see. And then he sent the contract.
So he came to you.
He came to
you.
me.
Okay.
Yeah. He had heard the long history of that there was a TV show that my father had created, and then he was told he couldn't star in a TV show because he was Chinese, and then suddenly Kung Fu came out. It was very similar, and all those things. And he said, is that true? Do you have that TV show? And I said, sure. And he said, oh my gosh, would you want to make that? Have you? Do you have it? Do you know where it is? And I was like, yeah, I have it right here.
So you had the script. You had the script.
Yeah.
Was it it was a feature film at the time, or is it?
No, it was TV series.
TV series. Okay, so
yeah,
many episodes, one episode. Like, what did he?
What we had was the official treatment that he
Mhm.
had submitted
Mhm.
and pitched, and many drafts of it. Sometimes it was visioned as a half hour, and then sometimes as an hour, and then a lot of notes and research that he had done for it. And so I showed it to Justin, and he was like, "Oh my God, this is actually really good. Would you want to make this?" And I was like, "Yes, I would want to make this." And then I was like, "Well, let's see if he's really willing to partner with me." And he just straight up, right out of the box, there was no negotiating back and forth. He was like, "We're partners. You're in. We're doing this together." And I will always be extremely grateful to him for that.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. It really is an amazing show. I mean, having known about the legacy of what this show was like for so many years as a Bruce Lee fan, and then to see it finally come to fruition and finally be made with great actors in it, great action scenes in it, it's such a emotional moment for me when I first saw the first episode. I was like, "Oh my God, this is actually the legend of this secret Bruce Lee project is now actually being made." So it was so cool to have be done or to get done. What was the creative process like for you? How were you involved in the writing and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, Justin just involved me from the very beginning. We, talked it through. What do we think the show is? What's the way into the show? We met with all the writers together that we, interviewed. Once we had hired Jonathan Tropper, we were together in all of those meetings. I read all the scripts. I went to a lot of the castings for actually all the people here. I was in their casting. And I would get all the dailies, all the rough edits, all the music, everything, just everything.
Right.
And it was an amazing training ground for me. And in terms of who are my mentors now, I would say that Justin's been a huge mentor for me in the business. Yeah. Yeah.
So he kind of took your hand and walked you through the whole process of how to get it done. Yeah, because
Yes.
I imagine you're sitting on this thing for years.
50 years.
Yeah, and you want to get it done, but it's like how? How do you get it done? And it takes a partner like Justin to come in and sort of go, okay, this is how we're going to do it, right? And this
Yeah.
is how we're going to film it. What's the status now? So we've seen it bounce around. It's been canceled, restarted. Now it's on Netflix, doing amazing. If you guys haven't seen it,
Yes.
and I give you a suggestion. Even if you've seen it, just turn it on and play it.
Yes.
Even if you're not at home, because those metrics are important, really important.
It is true. Yeah, I will say this, just putting it out there shamelessly. We are on seasons 1 through 3 are on Netflix. It just dropped on Friday, and already we're at number 7. We're at number 6. Number 6. We were at 9 and 7. Now 6. We keep going down.
Gotta make it number 1, guys. Gotta make it number 1. Everyone support this.
So, but in order for us to get another season, which we are all really wanting, you got to watch it. Seasons 1 through 3, you got to watch it all the way through. And at the end, you got to give it the double thumbs up. I loved it. Double thumbs up.
It's hard for me to not think about how, your father was so important to Asian Americans, especially someone like me growing up. And then now you have a show like this that can affect a whole nother generation. It's like multiple generations down. That's still tied to your father, but is moving the bar for Asian Americans. I mean, literally from the time of your father until, I don't know, 5 years ago, there was no Asian American anything really. I mean, there was these random small projects here and there happening, but now there's this wave happening. We see Asian Americans diversity and representation happening. How do you see that? Like having gone through it, a whole thing of seeing terrible representations of us on screen to finally, something like Joy Luck Club that comes out and you think it's going to change and then nothing happens for 20 years, right? Then a couple of those smaller projects, and then now this, what we're in right now, which I call the Asian American kind of renaissance that we're going through right now.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? How's that?
Yeah.
Someone like you who's been intimately tied into this for many generations. How's that feel?
Yeah, I mean, it's about time. But the reason why it hasn't been able to stick is because the people in the positions of power need to shift. We need Asians, Asian Americans in positions of power. I mean, it's amazing the renaissance that's happening right now, and that there are projects out that have Asian leads where they don't have to be Asian leads, right? And they're just, our stories are getting told, as in Warrior, like this is an Asian American story, and one that most people don't know, right? Like so many people, when I would talk to them about Warrior and when it's set, and I'd say it's all right before the Chinese Exclusion Act, and they'd say, "What is that? What's the Chinese Exclusion Act? Never heard of that." So we need our stories told, but then we also need to just be human beings, talented human beings with skill in projects. And then we also need people in positions of power so that we have, it's like in the room where it happened, right? Like you have to be the decision makers as well. So we're on that trajectory. We're on that trajectory, and we will get there. I have zero doubt. When, how long, I think it's shifting quite fast now.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that it's picking up speed. Yeah.
That said, what's next for you? What are you producing next? I know you talked about a couple of projects. Let's get into that.
Yes, I am producing a biopic with Ang Lee as a filmmaker. Yep. Yep.
And his son is playing your dad, right? Is that
Yep.
still on the board?
Yep.
Okay,
And
right.
his son is gonna play my father, Mason Lee. And poor guy's been training for like 2.5 years.
It's a method. He's doing the method thing. Is he cha-cha dancing first and then going into?
Oh, he's doing it all. Yes,
Okay.
yes. I also created a animated series that we're working on right now. I have a project in China with Andy Chang, which is also a biopic of my father's teenage years growing up in Hong Kong.
Oh, wow, cool.
I have a couple projects with Justin, a TV series, a film, a documentary that are all in the works. I've got several things going on.
Wow, that's a lot. Let's talk about the animation. What is
Okay.
the theme of the animation? What is it related to Bruce Lee or the?
It is. It is. It's one of those things where I had to give myself permission to create it. It came through a lot of my sort of personal work on myself and my spiritual work. And it involves my entire family. So my brother is a character in it as well. And my daughter is a character in it as well. And my mother and me. And then when I was writing it, and others as well. But when I was writing it, I was like, I'm just going to leave myself out because that's weird. Writing a show about me, and it's not really me. It's like a fantasy version of me. But and then I was like, you really are going to put every member of your family in this and not you? Like, that's weirder.
Yes. Yes.
So I just had to let go of it. I just had to give zero fucks and just listen to my creative heart on it. This is what is wanting to come through me. So I'm going to give it a shot. Who knows if it'll work out, but I'm going to give it a shot.
Cool. And then I remember you mentioning novels.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Thanks. I forgot about this. Yes, I wrote a treatment for a novel series, and I have a co-author, Fonda Lee, and we just finished the first book in a YA novel series called Guardian of the Scroll, and that will be coming out next year. And I am right now working on a totally non-Bruce Lee related novel of my own.
So why YA?
YA because I wanted to speak to a younger generation. And the theme of the book is, my father didn't just write the treatment for warrior. He wrote many film and TV ideas, and they all have some similarities to them. They're all martial arts related and that sort of thing, and they're all about like the journey of a martial artist. And so I took them and made a fantasy world out of many of the characters and themes from them. And so the lead character is a young man named Chang, and he is on his quest, and it's a wonderful fantasy
Awesome.
world that Fonda has helped to really create.
Can you? Now all of a sudden, I'm like trying to imagine. Like, can you paint a picture of me for me? Like, where are you getting the inspiration from? Is there a closet you go into and it's all your dad's stuff, and you go through these like what is that like for you? Like, I can't imagine what that is, right? I fantasize about having access to that information, but you have the key. So what is it?
If you want to see it, just let me know.
Yes.
Come on down. It's funny because when my father died, it was right before Enter the Dragon came out. So then Enter the Dragon came out, and it was this huge success. And everybody's like, who's this Bruce Lee guy? Oh my gosh. And my mom thought, well, this is going to stop. This is going to go away because he's not alive. And then it didn't stop, and it just kept going. And thankfully for her, she held on to all of my father's things. And so for many years, the secret archive vault was like a gajillion boxes in our garage.
Wow.
And that's where it stayed for many years. And then my mom sent it down to me when I started looking after the legacy. And it was in my office. It was just in my office for, a whole room in the office.
So you grew up around these boxes. It's just stuff, right? It's just really just stuff. I mean, and
tons of writings, tons of books.
Do you have a glass of wine and go in and start like looking at stuff? Like, how does it?
I make a bubble bath.
Like what's that like?
I try not to get the papers wet.
I don't know,
that would be bad.
From my perspective, it would be like it's such a sacred thing that
Yeah.
you have to make an event for it. But maybe for you, it's not. You're just going into the garage in the middle of the night, you can't sleep, and you find something, and it inspires you. Like,
yeah,
must be
well, it's
amazing.
funny. Well, it's not in a garage anymore.
Right.
It's because the stuff starts
Too valuable.
to deteriorate
Yes, yeah.
after a while, and it really needs to be looked after. So it's in a fine art storage facility right now, and so we have a lot of it scanned at this point, and a lot of his writings have been published also. So for the more commonplace things, I can go to digital versions or books or things like that. But yeah, every time I go in there and just start, I mean, it's so inspiring. Every single person that has ever come to visit the archive and looked at the amount of output that my father generated are all like, oh yeah, I'm not doing anything with my life.
That's the thing. I mean, it's amazing that he had the personality that he had. It was kind of OCD about all that, right? Like every single thing. Like I remember seeing like it was a copy of it, but it was notebooks of his training, like day-to-day training, and every single little exercise that he did. Like I saw that he did curls with his pinkies, right? Like all that information, and then the drawings, right? Yeah. He was an incredible artist. Like people forget about that, but he's such a good drawer. Yeah. In terms of drawing like the diagrams for fighting, but also his ideas and all that kind of stuff. So this I mean, you have philosophy, you have art, you have his readings, all the books that and all that stuff is.
We just sent his books up to the Wing Luke Museum for them to care for. It's over 2,800 books. Wow. Many of them annotated and underlined. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's got to be the foremost collection of fighting and training books in the country, if not the world. It is, and philosophy books and self-help books. He called it prescriptive reading. Anything you wanted to know about, he would read about. And it's funny, like you asked me about who were my influences. I would say books are so much an influence for me. Like when I read The Four Agreements for the first time, or I read The Power of Now for the first time, or those were life-changing. things for me.
Mm.
And I think they were the same for him. You know, I mean, when we were kids, we would go, because there's also a lot of weapons and like training equipment and stuff, and we would just like bash each other with them. We would take the throwing stars out and throw them in to plywood and stuff like that in the backyard. So some of the stuff got kind of beat up, but you know, he was a Renaissance man. Because you talk about, you know, he could draw beautifully. He had beautiful penmanship. He designed his own jewelry. He designed his own stationery. He designed his own furniture. He designed his own clothing.
Yeah, he was super fashionable.
Super fashionable. Yeah. And like he just was, everything was artisanal. Like talk about expressing yourself, actualizing yourself. This is why, like, when people are like, oh, they're going to remake Enter the Dragon, I'm like, go ahead.
Yeah, I had that same thought. I was like, I feel sorry for whoever that is that has to play that character. It's like, no,
I'm sure it's going to be, well, I don't know, whatever. If they ever remake it, I'm sure it can be an entertaining film, but it's not going to be that. Yep. Because you can't be Bruce Lee. You can't. And this is the lesson, right? It's like, and nobody can be me and nobody can be you. Yep. So like, be you fully. Because if you do that, then nobody will ever mix you up with anyone else. You know what I mean? Because, yeah.
Simple, powerful. I think that was probably one of the strongest things that your dad ever taught, besides the martial arts. And I think a lot of people don't understand your father, think it's just martial arts. But those thoughts, those ideas about creativity and identity are so powerful, so strong, and so direct, right? Just like his form of martial arts. There's no bullshit around it. He's just telling you exactly how you should be and not to be afraid to be yourself. Is very formative for me growing up. It was super formative for me.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine what it's like, you know, being the daughter to have all that wealth of information just right there at your fingertips all the time, you know. It's amazing. And now let's talk about the podcast, because I think the podcast is an extension of those ideas and how you take his ideas and put them in different situations in life, right? Like what inspired the podcast?
You know, the thing that inspired the podcast is his philosophy, because his philosophy is where he and I really intersect. Like I'm not and never will be the martial artist he was. I'm not interested in being the martial artist he was. But his thoughts on life and being a human being and what that is what gets me up in the morning. And so I have been reading his words for so long, and I wanted people to know this about him, because, you know, everybody knows the Kung Fu and they know the action films, but they don't know that the reason that we're still talking about him now, you know, more than 50 years past his death, is the personal work, the philosophy. I mean, we call it philosophy, right? It's kind of a lame word because it sounds very dry. It's the personal work. It's the going within and looking at what is there and then trying to heal the parts of you and let go of the parts of you that aren't serving you, that are getting in the way, so that you can be fully yourself, so that you can flow, right? And so the podcast was my way of trying to get that message out. And it really led to me writing the book that I wrote, you know, because this is the thing that I wanted people to know about him.
I like it because a lot of your guests are women, right? And so it has a very feminine take on his ideas, because I think most people think it's very masculine, whatever. But I think a lot of the thoughts and ideas are universal, right? And I really like how you guys discuss those ideas that could be construed as something very masculine, but also the feminine side of it, right? Your dad was about balance also.
Yes.
And so I think that's really was interesting to me to see how that podcast has looked at those ideas in a way that's outside of your father, but in just pure idea form. It's great. It's great. It's still going on, right?
It's still going on. Yeah. It's still going on. In fact, we're in the middle of I just released an episode 2 weeks ago all about dragons. and all about, it's just me, this one, solo podcast episode,
You as a
talking
dragon.
about what the dragon and the symbology of the dragon means to me, how I think my father embodied it, how I think his philosophy embodies the idea of the dragon, that Unitarian philosophy, because a dragon is an impossible thing. It's an impossible thing made from possible parts, but brought together as a whole, make an impossibly powerful thing. You know? I mean, you look at the Chinese dragon, it's made up of like 9 different animals, which on their own are all separate things. Together, they're this magical, powerful being. So to me, that's a message for all of us. Like together, that's why we're all here, stone soup, right? So together, we make something way more powerful.
Yes. How are we on time?
Wrap it up.
Wrap it up. Okay, last thing. 'Cause, yeah, I realize we're a little bit over.
Listen, you
But-
give me a microphone, ask me questions, I'll be here all
And
night.
I'm also like super fascinated by everything. That last dragon thing, I'm like, okay, all right.
Listen to the podcast, and then you'll get it. But yes,
Okay, last thing, the foundation, right?
Foundation,
And I
yes.
really on their website, I read through 3 pillars of youth. 3 pillars of youth mental wellness, one family, and legacy, encouraging people to strive for honest self-expression in alignment with mind and body and spirit and in harmony with one another.
yes.
Right? And so that obviously is the overall kind of philosophy of your father. How do you apply that to the foundation and charity work?
Yeah, so the Bruce Lee Foundation, a lot of people get this mixed up. They think the foundation is the business, but the foundation is our nonprofit. It's our charitable entity. And what we do is try to pass my father's teachings on to the next generations and to put tools in the hands of youth to help them to be more resilient, to be to have some tools so that when life goes sideways, because it always does at some point, that they have something to turn to. And the reason that I got this started is because my father's teachings and words have healed me personally. They have made me stronger. They have made me more confident. They have made me be able to get up here and claim some things for myself and not be afraid to be Bruce Lee's daughter. And so I want everyone to have that. You know, like once you heal, once you feel better in your life, you go, first of all, you go, oh my God, it's possible to feel better. And then you're like, I want everyone to feel better. Because if we all felt better, we would be more joyful. We would be together. We would be, you know, that impossible thing. We would be that magical creature, right? And so I wanted to be able to put this into the hands of kids. So we have kids camps that called Camp Bruce Lee, and it's a way of making it super fun, but also passing on these little lessons like, oh, well, you know, it's like being interviewed here. It's like, who are you? What are you all about? Let's find out, and let's do some martial arts, and let's have some fun, and let's be strong in our bodies, and let's give you some tools, you know, so that when you know, one of the things my father talked about all the time is the art of dying. And he said, everybody wants to learn how to win, but nobody wants to learn how to lose. But if you learn how to lose, then you don't lose that often. You actually win every time because there's something you're taking from it. So these are the things like know this, you know, so that you can learn how to learn how to take those uncomfortable feelings when they come up and figure out what to do with them, right? So it's in the vein of mental wellness, but it's really personal empowerment, right? And personal growth. And we do exhibits at museums and things like that. But it's what I'm doing up here, just passing it on. Pass it on. Give it away. There's no such thing as, we have such a scarcity mindset.
Mm.
There's not enough. There's not enough for everyone. There's so much. There's way more than enough for everyone. And this is what we need to let everybody know.
Awesome. I think that's a really good stopping point, actually. Again, I could go on and on for hours, but I think this is a good stopping point. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Thank you, Dan.
It's
I really
amazing.
appreciate you doing this.